I want you to imagine this hypothetical for me. You're sitting in a room, and in this room, there are billions and billions of people. You have Christians, Muslims, Hindus, but also politicians, cult members, and philosophers. They're all debating. They're shouting over each other that their specific deity, their specific, what essentially is a stranger, is a real one. To me, this mental image always felt hypocritical. They can't be all right. The perception of their gods, celebrities, gurus, and or themselves is contradictory to others. But recently I realized there's more to this. And this mental image is not only limited to religion, this applies to you as the viewer, how you see celebrities, internet personalities, and ideologies. The evidence for belief isn't in the arguments they're making. No, there's another kind of evidence. The evidence for the room itself. The fact that billions of humans across totally different cultures, times, and continents all evolved with the same mechanism to bow down and or blindly adhere to someone they've never met. Why do we do this? Why do we worship what it seems just strangers? I went looking for the answers, from evolutionary biology to the corners of philosophy, and what I found is that stranger isn't out there. The stranger is a safeguard, a kind of solution to what's in here.
Let's start with the hardware. I mean, why would the brain even want worship? There's a concept in sociology called the Dunman's number. It suggests that the human brain can only maintain about 150 stable relationships. Any more than that, and chaos breaks out. You can't trust people that you don't know. So, how did we go from tribes of 150 people to nations of millions? If you and I both knew that same someone, we can trust each other, even if we never met. We worship the stranger because it is the glue to our civilization. Without that stranger, we're just scattered tribes fighting in dirt. I mean, this explains how religious, democratic, and social nations developed their countries. But it goes deeper than society. It's about survival. Evolutionary psychologists call this the HAD, the hyperactive agency detection device. If early humans heard a twig snap, they had two choices: assume it was the wind or a predator. The humans who assumed it was someone, an agent, a spirit, a stranger, survived. We are all descendants of the paranoid. We are hardwired to see faces where there are only none and intentions where there are only physics. So biology explains why we worship, but philosophy tries to explain why do we cling to it so desperately. Friedrich Nietzsche, the man who's famous for saying God is dead, had a take on this. He believed that we worship strangers because we are afraid of our own freedom. Nietzsche argued that true freedom is terrifying. It's a heavy burden, creating your own values, deciding your own purpose. It's hard. Must we ourselves not become gods, simply to appear worthy of it? So that's the catch. If there's no stranger, then you have to become God. You have to define good and evil. And most people, they would rather follow a someone than carry that weight. To Nietzsche, worship is a kind of a defense mechanism. If I bow down to a god or a king or a guru, I don't have to be responsible for my own mortality. I just follow the rules. We worship the same stranger because we're too cowardly to worship our own potential.
But then you have Søren Kierkegaard, the father of existentialism. He took the opposite view. Kierkegaard suffered from something he called angst. He called it the dizziness of freedom. Imagine standing on a cliff. You're afraid of falling, but you're also terrified by the realization that you're free to jump. That is dizziness. He looked at the universe and saw that it was objective, cold, and silent. He realized that if you can prove that the stranger exists, you don't need faith anymore. As Kierkegaard said, if I can grasp God objectively, I do not believe. God isn't a fact. The stranger is a life raft we grab because the ocean of freedom is too big. He believed that logic and reason could never get you to God. You can't prove that the quote-unquote stranger exists, but you need him. For Kierkegaard, worship isn't about proof. It's about the leap of faith. We worship the stranger not because it makes logical sense, but because the alternative is despair. We choose to believe in God because it anchors us in the absurd universe. It is a subjective choice to keep from drowning in the infinite. So far in this video, we've figured out there's a cognitive foundation for paranoia and the philosophy of fear. But there's still a piece of this puzzle missing for me. Because for people in that room, the stranger doesn't feel like a philosophy. It feels real. It feels like a presence. I mean, to whom are you to tell what's real or not? Well, it actually turns out we can locate that presence on a map of the brain. In the 1980s, a neuroscientist named Dr. Michael Perstinger developed something called the God helmet. He found out by stimulating the temporal lobes with weak magnetic fields, he could induce a sensed presence in the room. Healthy people would sit in a chair and suddenly feel viscerally that there's a stranger standing right behind them. But actually, this is where I misled you a little. You see, in the early 2000s, Swedish researchers tried to replicate this experiment and failed. They argued that Perstinger's results weren't caused by the magnets, but by suggestibility. The participants felt a presence simply because they were told they would. Now, using this debunked theory brings something even more scarier. It implies that the God effect is so easily manufacturable that you don't even need a machine to trigger it. You just need the expectation. The brain is so desperate for that stranger that it will use placebo effect to hallucinate one into existence. When we pray or chant or starve ourselves in the desert, we are hacking our own temporal lobes to activate this sensed presence. I mean, I had a fair share of sleep paralysis as a negative experience. But what about the opposite? What if it was positive? Why does this presence feel so comforting? Freud had a name for this: transference. When we are children, we are helpless. We rely entirely on giant, powerful strangers, our parents, to feed us and protect us. As we grow up, we realize our parents are just flawed humans. They can't save us from death. The universe becomes a terrifyingly big place again. So what do? We project that parent image onto the universe itself. We worship that stranger because deep down we are terrified of being orphans. We want a cosmic father or mother who is always watching, so we never have to feel truly alone in the dark. So I look back at that mental image of that room, the billions of people arguing. I still see them as hypocrites, but I see something else now. The evolutionary survivor who's terrified of the twig snapping in the forest. I see a Nietzsche-esque coward afraid to lead himself. I see the Kierkegaardian theist taking the leap of faith to cure his despair. And I see a neurological pattern stimulating its own brain to feel a parent's love. We worship strangers because the human brain is a machine designed to bridge the gap between me and everyone else. And maybe, just maybe, when we look up at that stranger, we're just looking at a reflection of ourselves.
Hi, this is the end of this video. If you made it this far, write a comment down. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Did you disagree with anything? And also, other than that, just have a great day.